on your co-op program yesterday. I have not eaten in 2 days. My sister and I are facing eviction. I needed this job to be able to live. And, I told him, my situation. I mean, he knew I'd been orphaned, and because you had to be economically and socially disprivileged to qualify for the DO program to begin with.
Right.
So I told him what happened with the employer, and instead of helping me like I expected him to, I expected him as the adult, him as the guidance counselor of that school, with in loco parentis rights over me as a child, as a student of that school. I expected him to help me in some way.
Yeah.
And what he did was he broke into this lecture about how Ulysses S. Grant had overcome the obstacle of alcoholism and drank himself stupid on the battlefield, but went on to become a hero, a Civil War hero, and a president anyway. And I'm sitting there like, okay, and this has exactly what to do with my situation.
Yeah, exactly.
And he said to me, well, you just have to basically figure it out for yourself, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
You're supposed
So
to wait at
horrified
13
and just,
and you're traumatized and overwhelmed. You're supposed to figure it out for yourself? Oh.
yeah, when I wasn't even old enough to get a regular job other than maybe a paper route, which that certainly doesn't pay enough to live.
Yeah, that's right. At 13, you can't even go out and get a job at Jack in the Box. What are you going to do?
Right. I mean, that was like my only employment opportunity was through the DO program. So then I went to the principal. I went to the next step up. I went to the assistant principal who wasn't in. She was out on maternity leave. So I went to the principal. And the principal was basically, in so many words, get out of my hair, kid. I've got too many other problems to deal with. You're going to have to work it out with the guidance counselor. I mean, you know, so I left. I walked right out of school. And I didn't care if at that point if it meant a write-up or not. And I walked home. And I told my sister I was in tears, and I told her what happened. And there were these three guys sitting in the living room whom I had met before. They were regulars at the diner that she was a waitress at, and they were bikers. In fact, they were members of an outlaw motorcycle gang that is a rival to the Hells Angels. And these guys were her, quote, friends. And they offered to help us out by offering us a quote job at an establishment that they owned that catered to businessmen and community pillars. And what that establishment was called a gentleman's club. It was a strip joint, but it was actually a strip joint that also functioned as a brothel.
Right.
And I didn't want to take off my clothes.
What? We dropped your call again. I don't believe it.
I think we got disconnected. I have to call you back,
Yeah,
Jody.
you gotta call me back again. All right, I'm gonna keep our listeners busy while you call in again. Well, Jacqueline is gonna tell us she's tried everything. She's gone to the adults for help. She doesn't have really many options, and now these men have sat there and said to her, okay, honey, we got a job for you. So they've now said, all right, we've got a job for you at this gentleman's club, and then what?
Well, I asked them what the job entailed, and they said that all we had to do was dance naked for these men that would come in to buy drinks and meals like prime rib dinners and stuff, and that these were businessmen. Well, I didn't want to dance naked in front of men. I didn't even like changing in front of the other 13-year-old girls in my gym class in the locker room.
No. Oh, God. I didn't even like changing a gym. You're right.
I mean, yeah. I was this very shy, Orthodox Jewish child. All right? And my world was just ripped out from underneath me. But we had no choice because nobody was interested in helping. When I got, sexually harassed out of a legit job, that sent me a message that, as a girl, as a female, as a poor female, I didn't count.
Right.
I didn't have the same rights as men who are born in this country. I wasn't a full American. I wasn't a full human being. I was just, existed for men's benefit. That all the stuff that I had been raised to believe about this country was just utter hogwash. It didn't apply to me because I was poor and female,
Mm.
and that shattered me to the core. And
Right.
but we had no choice because we were starving.
Yeah.
We were facing eviction. Um, and we thought that this was something we could do for a month or two, and it was just dancing naked. Well, we
Oh, I
get
know that
there.
feeling. I did the same too. You're thinking just until I get out of this, right? You know?
Well, yeah, and I didn't even want to be in it, and neither did my sister. But then we go there, and it was surprise, we weren't allowed to leave.
Oh, we dropped you again. Call back again. I have no idea what's wrong with the radio station, but call in again. All right, for our listeners, this poor girl has no choice but to go ahead and do this number. Obviously, trying to get through as best she can here. And then, are you calling back in? We dropped the call. There we go. And so she's
Yes.
obviously going to try to get through as best as she can. And then what? Then what happened? So
Well,
you're at the club,
well,
obviously.
what happened was when my sister and I got to this establishment, we found out that we weren't allowed to quit that job. We
You
were a
couldn't
biker
quit.
club property.
Club
We were
property.
property of this gang.
Oh.
And yes, and what happened was that it wasn't just dancing. We were raped. We were forced to sexually gratify some of the patrons, which I called Johns, in the VIP room. My
Oh.
very first sexual experience was a gang rape.
Oh.
And that was when I was 14. It was a week after my 14th birthday that happened. And I was so horrified. I laid there shaking after they were done. And as soon as I could, I snuck out this side door. And I went to try to find a flatfoot, a Philadelphia beat cop, to try to get help. And there was blood running down my thighs.
Oh.
I had a little mini skirt on, and there was blood running down my thighs. There was no question that I had been raped and injured. I
Right.
found this I found this beat cop. I told him what happened. I was crying. I was hysterical, and he looked at me and he refused to help me. He said, "It's useless for me to even write up a report. You take off your clothes for money. You're only a whore anyway."
Oh. And he knew you were underage even. I mean,
There was no mistake that I was underage. For one thing, I had my little change purse in my miniskirt pocket, and that had my ID for the junior high school DO program in it.
oh,
It had my birth date right on it.
I can just see
You
this.
know, I mean,
Your change purse with your junior high ID, and the man says this to you? The cop
yes,
says
it
this
was
to you.
because I was only a whore, and that's when I was given the message that basically this whole society threw me and my sister away into the prostitute class.
Right.
We didn't choose this. We didn't want this.
Right.
And nobody cared. Nobody was going to help us. And I went back to the building, and I expected to be killed for that stunt because, going to the cops. Well, it turns out that I wasn't. I wasn't even beaten for that. In fact, these guys just laughed because they knew what was going to happen. They knew what was going to happen because nobody cares about prostituted women. We're looked at as scum of the earth. We're looked at as meat puppets that exist for male benefit, and we were disposable, and
For
nobody would
instance,
care one
what you're
pig
saying is that
about us.
what you're saying is they didn't have to stand there with a gun at the door to keep you in, did they? They knew. They knew what would happen. You know?
Exactly, they knew what would happen, and the other reason they knew what would happen is because a good percentage of the Johns that went to this quote gentleman's club were cops.
Really?
So, yes. So after that gang rape, I faced a month of sweating bullets, fearing an unwanted pregnancy, which, I mean, the idea of going through pregnancy and childbirth had put me off ever since, I was taught about the birds and the bees from my grandmother. And being, an Orthodox Jewish child, I got a good solid education on that from my Orthodox Jewish grandmother. And I was like, well, I don't ever want to go through that. Well, I didn't want to go through that under the best of circumstances, and being gang raped and forced into prostitution is definitely not what one would consider the best of circumstances.
No.
Let me tell you.
Nope.
So, and this was back in 1980, where women and girls had much better access to birth control than we do now, which is why I'm speaking out now, because I don't think people understand the gravity of the problem here.
No, they don't.
And after about a month passed and the pregnancy scare passed, I mean, I didn't end up pregnant, thank God. My sister took me to the local Planned Parenthood. We both got on the pill because that was the only measure of control that I could have over my own body. That was the only measure of control that I could have over what was done to me by others. That I may not have had no control over anything else, but I'd at least have control over not being forced to be pregnant out of the deal.
Well, you can understand, also right there, you can understand why I'm very upset right now about this thing I'm hearing about New York, where they're outlawing condoms, and the girls are not carrying them because they're being considered evidence of prostitution. I'm thinking, no, they need this to protect them until they can get out of this situation, you know?
I mean, you know, there's a lot of Johns that won't wear condoms, and there's some that will. I mean, you know, but, you know, when the Johns are the type of guys that pay, they're not paying for regular sex. They're not paying for company. They're paying for you do what I say, rape on demand sex. They're paying for the right and the privilege to do to a woman or a girl what they would never want done to their own wives, girlfriends, sisters, or daughters.
That's right.
These are men, I mean, all those men that went to that so-called gentleman's club, these were men that were bank presidents, they were community employers, they were clergy members, they were police detectives, they were executive management of sales companies, of high-level, executive positions, brokers, everything. And these guys were married, and a lot of them had daughters that were older than me. And they were doing to me and the other girls in that establishment what they would never want another man to do to their own wives, girlfriends, and daughters. Now that sent me a message too. I mean, I didn't have the language as a kid to express it all, but I had the knowledge of just how wrong this whole situation was, and that nobody would help me. Not the police, not the guidance counselor. I mean, nobody helped me. I had nowhere to go. I had literally nowhere to turn. Where do you turn when the people, the adults who are in positions of privilege and power and authority over other adults won't help you and say, well, you're garbage, you're only a whore?
Well, and another thing is, I'm hearing this thing, the big push in the legislature in all the states right now is tougher legislation, and I'm like, no, what we have to do if we're going to actually do anything about trafficking is we have to do something about the fact that the police are coming in and patronizing as clients, and also they are involved in actually doing the trafficking, which means that they are protecting this. So if we're going to do anything about trafficking, we've got the fox guarding the chicken coop here, and that's what's blocking anything being done about trafficking. We have a Salvation Army here right now in Vegas that has a safe house for trafficking victims that is empty. And believe me, we have trafficking victims here in Vegas because my phone is ringing off the hook. And the reason why there's no one in that shelter is because the cops are busy protecting their ass. You know, and so I mean, but you're saying why? You're saying why? They're the Johns, and they're protecting. They're part of the trafficking. They're part of the problem.
Oh, they're not protecting their ass. They're protecting their "my dick comes first" male.
Yeah.
That's what they're protecting. And I will go to the mat anytime, any place, any day with these jokers. We had half the Pentagon that was just found out to have been consuming child pornography and being involved to some extent with trafficking in women.
Yes. Now you tied into why Jeannie Palfrey's dead right now. Jeannie Palfrey had released in her black book, in her phone book, about the fact that she had people that were patronizing her prostitutes or women as part of international trafficking. And the very night before she was found dead, she had said to me, we were talking, and a lot of people didn't know it because, it's an anonymous program. She had said that if she was found guilty, that she was going to release some names and deal out some information. So she was going to call a press conference the night before she was found dead. She went to her mother's house, hide out. And I find it very interesting, without naming names, that, of course, after she's mysteriously found dead, hanging in the same manner that the escort, who also had been the escort for another politician, who is definitely part of the international trafficking, was also found hanging in the same fashion. Magically the ethics charges against this politician was dismissed magically. So I mean,
Well,
there's very serious problem going on, and we've got a lot of dead hookers, a trail of dead hookers and dead madams that are covering up, because also the New Orleans madam was talking about the fact that our politicians are using the prostitutes as part of trafficking, and she's also found mysteriously hung in her jail cell too. So, there's something really going on here,
I'll tell you, you hit the nail right on the head. And the thing is that I also want to add.
We dropped you again. Call back again. I'll keep our listeners. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of you may not remember who Jeannie Palfrey is. Jeannie Palfrey was the DC madam, and she had a black book, of the people that were her callers that she released to the media when she went on trial. And we've lost the call. I don't know if you're calling in again. There we go. I'm sorry, I called you
Sorry,
Jeannie.
sorry about that.
Jeannie.
But
Yeah, Jeannie, I'm sorry. It's very upsetting thinking about her death like that. Let me see if we've got you.
yes.
And there,
Well, I never
got you in again. Okay, yeah, Jeannie.
I never bought
madam.
I never bought that Jeannie's death was a suicide or an accident.
No, it wasn't.
And I'll tell you why. Because there was nowhere I could go for help as a child, as an American girl who was trafficked on American soil. I mean, I don't know if listeners realize this, but American victims of sex trafficking are not even covered under the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. We can't even get the same benefits that foreign-born women and girls can get.
We can't.
We can't get anything. We're not even recognized as crime victims. What we get instead is denied, and that's for those of us that escape and survive to tell about it.
But you have to wonder why. I mean, I looked at that and I realized that we're not getting the same services and protection as a foreign trafficking victim, and you got to wonder why that is. Why is that? And that's what I just don't understand it. Why are we not getting the same protection as a foreign-born victim when we're Americans? To me, if you ask me, it's because they don't want us in the system, because they don't want us going to the press and talking about domestic trafficking. What's happening to us,
We are witnesses to a global system of crimes against humanity of epic proportion. What we are witnesses to would be enough to hold the entire U.S. government before The Hague for violating the UN Convention on Torture, which, by the way, under international legal definition, the definition of torture also includes rape and sexual torture and forced pregnancy, forced childbirth, as well as forced sterilization. So, I mean, if the United States Senate ratified the UN Convention on Torture in 1994, it's not obeying its own laws that it ratified.
Right.
And the other thing is I wanted to talk about the escape. No one helped me. No one helped my sister. My only chance of escape was when a prospect to this club, who was serving as a doorman, bouncer kind of guy, he had about $8 grand worth of cocaine in his jacket pocket. And he asked the guy, the chapter club president, the motorcycle chapter club president who owned me, so to speak. He asked him permission to have me as entertainment for himself for one evening. And of course, I was not in a position to be allowed to refuse. Refusing any kind of sexual act with anybody is the number one thing that will get a prostituted woman or girl murdered.
Mm-hmm.
If not by the John, then by the pimp. I mean, you'll never hear a madam murdering a woman, but you'll hear about male pimps and traffickers doing it. Okay?
Absolutely.
And you'll hear about
trouble. They give them too much trouble, and boom. Yep.
Yep, and you'll hear about male Johns doing it. Now, the thing is, this guy, he was getting all worked up. He thought he was going to, get this hot young teenage, timid girl who couldn't speak. That was another thing that made me very attractive to them because I couldn't speak. I went mute after that incident with the gang rape when I was 14, when the police wouldn't help me. Over a period of weeks, I slowly stopped being able to talk until I was completely mute. Literally could not speak.
And they would find that quite attractive, I'm sure, these guys.
Well, they found it attractive because it's like, oh, well, her brain's melted. She can't talk. She must be the village idiot. And you can confirm this with your local deaf association because people think when you can't speak, I don't know what it is, but when people see that you're a mute and that you can't speak, they automatically think that you're the village idiot, and they will start getting very comfortable doing other things in front of you that are also criminal activities.
Yeah.
They will be very comfortable with you having your freedom to leave the premises and doing other shit because it's like, well, she can't talk. She's a village idiot. So this guy, the president of this biker club, that's what made him take a shine to me. And that's what actually saved my life because I was subjected to a lot less violence than my sister and a lot of the other girls there were. But I was still forced to, sexually gratify men that I would normally not even want to talk to, never mind get physically, next to.
Right.
And this guy, this prospect, he had permission to have me for the night, and I damn well showed him a good time, or I was, I'd be dead. So anyway, he started to get really worked up, and his head went back and his eyes shut, and this big bag of cocaine fell out of his leather jacket. It was about $8,000 worth in 1984 money. I saw that as my ticket the hell out of there. Because I knew exactly where to take that white currency. I was like, money. I knew exactly where to take that white currency and convert it into real currency. And that's what I did. I scooped down and snagged it while he's sitting there with his head back, waiting for me to go to the dressing room to get the joy gel from another girl to show him the time of his life. And he's sitting there with his head back and his eyes closed. And his cocaine and me were gone. I jumped into my street clothes and I had this little junky used motorcycle. And I made hell bent for leather to New York City. And in less than 2 hours, I sold that bag of white wealth for some green. And that was the only way I was able to exit and escape because I had no way to get a place to live, to try to pick up the pieces of my life. I had nothing. There was no one willing to help me, and that was made clear to me when a cop wouldn't help me after I'd been gang raped. I was 17 when I escaped.
Hey, the coke was useful. It saved your life,
Well, I mean, it did. I mean, because I turned that over and got $8,000 in less than 2 hours, and that's worth 15 to 20 grand in today's currency, just for listeners' benefit, so that they can get a picture of the kind of money. Now, that was enough money for me to get a place to live, a used car, some normal clothes, and to try to pick up the pieces of my life, as a teenage prostitute victim.
Yeah, because believe it or not, what you're saying is the truth, is that it takes money to get out. It takes money to get out.
It takes a lot of money because you have to hide. I didn't just need money to get out to get a place to live and, and all that. I needed enough to be able to move and hide because you don't steal $8,000 worth of cocaine from the traffickers who own you when if you get uppity and refuse a sex act to a customer, your life isn't even worth 8 cents. I mean, I know one of my friends got murdered by being sent out on a bad date with a known violent John. She was a 22-year-old single mother. She was found with her throat cut from ear to ear in a dumpster behind a welding school.
Well, I mean,
all right.
the thing is, me, I had to literally go underground for over a year until I heard my traffickers were taken care of. I had to change my looks, my appearance, and I had to literally hide out underground. I didn't even leave the house for about a year. So even yeah, that whole underground process even takes time, you
And
know?
I had to change my name. I had to change my last name.
Yep.
I had to
Yep.
hide.
Mhm.
And and the thing is that on top of that, I had to hide for 27 and a half years because the guys that were directly responsible, and I'm not talking about the gang per se, I'm talking about the three men that were high up in that gang. The one was the sergeant at arms, okay?
Wow.
Um, these guys that trafficked me and my sister, I had to wait until either they were in prison or dead, all three of them,
So you
before
stayed
I could
underground.
actually.
Wait, you stayed underground for that long?
That's correct. And how I did it was I changed my last name um, by going to a courthouse in a different county that I did not live in, and I used the excuse that I wanted to honor, my grandparents' heritage as Holocaust refugees that had to get forged papers to get past the Nazis to get the hell out of Eastern Europe, and then I wanted to take my family's original
How
last
clever.
name.
How clever.
And so that's what I did. I mean, I wasn't, I wasn't, I always tell everybody else, I might have gotten a lot of looks as for for the chest that I had as a teenage dancer, but it was my sister that got blessed with the looks. I got blessed with the brains because uh, she didn't look at that as her exit strategy. She ended up marrying one of the Johns who was also a prospect for that gang, and he ended up almost murdering her. He took her away, far away from me, and where she had no transportation, no phone, and he beat the crap out of her every night, almost killed her.
Isn't that what
We
abuses
weren't
do? That's
reunited
what
for
abuses
about.
do. They take away from family, they take away the phone, they take away money, they isolate them, and then beat the crap out of them. And oh.
And the thing is that is that I could sense that something bad was going to happen out of this but I couldn't speak. So I couldn't tell her, I couldn't say, no, Annalise, do not do this. This is a bad idea. Men who come here to pay to rape us are not going to love you.
Right, right. They're not.
You know?
Yep.
It doesn't, I mean, forget that Pretty Woman nonsense, okay? And this is before Pretty Woman came out. Now, I was a teenager that couldn't speak, and I had that kind of mental acumen that I could pick that up.
Well, by default, the guy
And
that's going to go in there is not going to be a nice guy. No. You know?
no, none of them. And the thing is that we weren't reunited for many, many years, but then she died of ovarian cancer right after we were reunited, which was back in 2001 when I was 34. But after I escaped, I mean, there was no help, there was no support,
Right.
and coming from poverty, and even what I had was not really enough to really rebuild my life. I
Right.
mean, I was lucky in that I escaped with absolutely no STDs.
Right.
But that's only because of when I was trafficked. Had I been trafficked after AIDS hit, after herpes came to my area, I probably would not have been so lucky. But I escaped completely unscathed. We're talking
Well,
not
you're
even
quite
going for
right. You're quite
syphilis.
right because most of the women that are coming out now, yeah, they've got Hep C, they've got tuberculosis, they've got what is it? That cancer, ovarian
HIV.
cancer, HPV. They've got HIV. They've got, I mean, and a big one that's been showing up lately in our survivors. I've got the chronic fatigue syndrome. That was big in the 80s. I suffer from that, but now it actually transmuted into fibromyalgia. So we've got a
Well, the
lot of
thing,
women coming in with fibromyalgia too. So yeah, there's a lot of things these women are suffering from now. Yeah.
and not only that, but the thing is, here's the real kicker. When I tell people my story and how I wasn't yet ever able to make it out of poverty because of the unexplained gap. I mean, we're talking my whole teenage life was just unaccounted for. I didn't have any connection or ties with mainstream, middle class, normal American society. So even though I didn't come out and say what had happened to me for many, many years, people can add 2 and 2 and get 4. They're not stupid.
Yeah, there's this
And
huge
then
gap.
they judged
You've got a gap.
that.
No school, no references, no rental history. Yeah, you've got a
Well,
huge gap to explain.
I actually did have high school, but that was only because these guys let me leave the building because I couldn't talk, and they thought I was just a village idiot. So I left. And went to school during the day. I couldn't talk. What kind of damage could I do?
Well, we're really
talk.
glad that you can speak now and tell us about this. How did you get your voice back?
When I was free. When I saw the lights on the Verrazano Bridge, and I was 10 minutes away from where I needed to go to sell that cocaine and buy my freedom and my escape into what I thought would be a better new life. And I saw it was at night, and the George Washington Bridge and the Verrazano Bridge was off to my right, and it was lit up like Christmas trees. If you ever drive up I-95, up the Cross Bronx Expressway, it's really pretty seeing those lights at night. And it was like, feeling like I was free. It was like Hanukkah and Christmas, my birthday, and the bat mitzvah that I never got to have, all wrapped up into one. It was just exhilarating. And I started to sing in Yiddish. I started to sing, and the first thing I said was the Shema, which is one of the most important Jewish prayers. I recited the Shema, and I started to just sing, and my voice came back because it was like this horrific nightmare from which I thought I would die in. I had awoken from and was set free from, because that guy dropped the club's cocaine,
God, I can just see you just breaking out in song after having lost your voice, and then I can just see you breaking out when you're free. That's amazing.
I was singing, and the tears were coming down my face because I was so happy. It was like, and that was what had kept me holding it together, as I never forgot who I was, even though I was almost nearly completely broken. I mean, I couldn't talk while I was there, but I never forgot who I was, who I came from, who my people were, and that is what carried me through. And you see, so I changed that currency over and got money, and I'm thinking I'm free. Well, I really wasn't, because I had unexplainable gaps. I had no extracurricular activities, because obviously I couldn't if I was being prostituted in a gentleman's club after school. I had no high school friends, because I couldn't make any friends because of what was going on in my life. How the hell could I make normal friends?
It wasn't like you could go to like the football game afterwards or after school activities, so you couldn't you couldn't have any friends.
I couldn't even talk. I couldn't even talk. Half the time teachers didn't even notice I was in the classroom or not, because nobody noticed that I was there.
Well, see, you're bringing up something else. I mean, while you're a trafficking victim and this is going on, you're actually going to school. But you're quiet. Yes. But I mean, this is going on. Basically, this was going on under the whole school's nose,
Everybody knew. Everybody knew. Wow. I mean, everybody except the other kids knew. The teachers didn't know because I couldn't talk. But, when people say, oh, nobody knew that trafficking was a problem, people don't know. Well, I'm going to tell you about all the people who didn't know. Let's talk about the Johns who went into that club who didn't know. Let's talk about these guys that were ministers and bank presidents and employers and, sales reps and newspaper reporters and vice squad police. Let's talk about the court probation officers and the judges who adjudicated underage prostitute victims. Yeah. Like a friend of mine who was not as lucky as me, she died at age 24. Her name was Shannon, and she would be my age if she were alive today. And Shannon had been prostituted since she was 9. Her mother was a poor single mom that, ended up with a boyfriend that was a pimp. The pimp, when she didn't make her quota, she wasn't trafficked by the motorcycle gang that I was trafficked by. Shannon was trafficked by her mother's boyfriend, which is different.
Mm.
But it's still the same
Still
sex
trafficking.
trade hell.
Yeah.
And exactly, it's still trafficking. And when the mother didn't make her quota, the pimp boyfriend threw her out of a third floor window. The mother was left with a broken back and left permanently paraplegic. Shannon was 9 years old at the time. The pimp then put 9-year-old Shannon out on what they call the host roll.
Right.
And Shannon talked to me because I was one of the few girls that would go, because I was allowed to go and go down to the market and buy meats and vegetables for this gentleman's establishment, and for the customers for their food, and occasionally I got some food out of the deal too, because I couldn't talk. Village idiot. What could I do? Couldn't talk. And the Italian market was also another place where a lot of prostitutes fleeing pursuit from police would sometimes duck and hide in the stores. And that's how I met Shannon. And Shannon was my age. And as soon as I saw her book into this one store, I followed because I knew that meant cops.
Right.
And, so I followed her, and I'm standing there and I'm shaking and I'm shivering next to her. And when she realized that I couldn't talk, she pipes up in this sassy but cute street slang, what, you a dummy? And she's smiling at me. And I just kind of looked down at my shoes, and she then figured out that I couldn't talk. So she spoke to me, and she was sharing with me how she had been outsmarting the Vice Squad since she was 9 years old and put out on the host roll. Now, let's talk about all these people who didn't know about trafficking.
Right.
What about all these police that arrested an underage prostitute?
Right.
They didn't know that at age 9, age 10, age 11, she was in the life for 5 years by the time I met her. You mean to tell me that all these adults, the social workers that had her case, the probation officers in the court system that had her case, the Vice Squad cops that arrested her that had her case, all these adults with privilege didn't know?
Right.
Let's talk about the Johns. Let's talk about the Johns.
You've got to key into kind of what I do and what I've been doing for a long time, because here's the thing. There was a girl when I first got into the family that I was, hooked up with. There was a girl that tried to run, and so they literally held her down and they rolled over her legs with a motorcycle. So they crushed both of her legs. So she couldn't walk. Now, what they did was they took and they put her in the upstairs bedroom. So obviously in an upstairs bedroom with casts on both of your legs, you're not going anywhere. Now, what blew my mind was that they continued to bring Johns up to see her. Now, the Johns could tell that she, this had happened to her. And the Johns, what blew my mind was that they could continue to function with her. I don't know how anybody could get an erection with her, but they did.
They didn't care.
They didn't care.
The erection.
Well, here's what blew my mind. I got to tell you this, because I would ask the men, I would say, like, why aren't you calling the police? Why aren't you reporting that this woman has just had this happen? She's being held captive upstairs. Why aren't you saying anything? And they would basically say, I'm not going to report it because then I could be exposed. I could have my find out. I could have my job find out. So they weren't going to call because they didn't want to be exposed. Now, I know good and well, here's the thing. The person on the front lines of this is the John. Now, I know that they see it, but they don't be outed. Now, I will tell you, over the years, I try to get the word out there, and I'm going to say it now, is if you see something going on, I do not report you to the police. If you see something going on, let me know about it. We can arrange to deal with it, and no, we're not going to have you tell your wife, and no, we're not going to expose you to your boss, but we will deal with it. We will get it taken care of, but we have to know about it. And we've been very, very lucky that we have had men that have seen horrible things going on, and they've called me and they've said, Jody, will you please go do something about this, such and such, and here, and they'll give me the information, and then we're able to do something about it, but they have to have a safe place to call, which has been one of my beefs, my only beef. I mean, Polaris does a really great job with the National Trafficking Hotline, but those men aren't going to call that hotline because they know that it's being recorded and it's going to the police, so they're not going to call. So there has to be a safe place for their mind for them to call until that day when they can feel safe about coming out. But that's the thing, the Johns are front line. So they're the ones that have to do something about this,
Well, the thing is, the Johns, I don't think they're going to do anything about it. Most of them, I mean, you've had a few that came to you. But let me tell you something from my experience as a trafficking survivor. The Johns are not going, these are the very people who do not want prostitution abolished. These are the same
Well,
ones that I'm sorry to say it, but it's with them, it's my dick comes first. And it's
oh
not just their
yeah,
dicks, it's their privilege, their
yeah.
nice lives, their good jobs. To hell with some poor girl's human rights that just got violated.
Well, that's what I'm
It
saying.
is,
They report it because they don't want to be outed. That's all they care about is them. Yeah.
well, then why, if they don't want to be outed, then why are they being Johns?
Well,
Why would
yeah.
they willingly want to use their money and their privilege to support this heinous institution? And that's precisely what prostitution is, Jody. It is an institution. Why would they support that? Why would they knowingly, if there's like, well, I don't want to be found out, well, then why would you want to participate in it by being willing to pay money for rape on demand sex that you obviously don't want to have with your wife or girlfriend for a good reason, and that is probably because it's something really disgusting that she has every right to refuse you to do to her.
Well, that's just it. In a case where, say, a woman is working independently, the money goes to her. But in a trafficking situation, that money is going into a whole criminal enterprise and it is supporting horrible things. Yeah. I mean, so they are contributing to trafficking and drug trafficking and terrorism and everything. I mean, I know in
Right.
the
I mean,
80s, the stuff that I saw going on, that money was going through straight to Saudi Arabia and the whole bin Laden thing. I mean,
oh, and it was going over to the KLA in Bosnia too,
yeah.
who are tied in with the Los Zetas guys who have a corner on the market with black market organ trafficking.
Oh, don't let me.
I mean, we're dealing with a real nice motley
We had
global
like,
crew here.
oh, let me tell you, we had a thing here in Vegas where I still have nightmares. I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. There's some pimps here in Vegas that they were making women disappear. If they learned here that to make a woman disappear was just a waste of money. If they needed to get rid of her, they could make more money selling her organs. And we did have a ring here in Vegas. I did manage to get it shut down and get the guy chased out of the area. But I mean, oh my God, that gave me nightmares when I realized what was happening and how much money these guys were making doing this. I mean, my God. But yes, they are definitely, when hookers are disappearing, they're not just disappearing anymore. They're definitely going on the black organ market.
Well, and the thing is that it's, granted you might get a few, and it's great that you're trying to reach out. I want to just say this so that you didn't think that I was criticizing your tactic, because obviously we're dealing with a very unorthodox structure, so it's going to require some unorthodox means
That's just
to
it.
save women and girls.
I know you
However,
aren't. I know you aren't. But I will get that occasional phone call where the man will feel sorry, for the situation, and he'll try. But it is a very rare man that will do that. Very rare.
oh yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if, if it was in most cases, it really wasn't that he felt bad, it was that he felt possessive. Like kind of an I love you for my
Don't get
benefit.
me started. Don't get me started. In almost every one of those cases, it wasn't that he wanted her rescued. It was it was that he wanted to get her into her house, into his house. I mean, in almost every rescue case where the Johns called, it's been his idea
I'm not
to rescue us
surprised.
to go to his house, and I've had to explain, no, that's not a rescue. But but you're right.
I
That's
know.
the idea of a rescue is into his house.
Right. What it is that it's a possession thing. He wants that shiny toy for himself. It's not that he cares about a person's human rights or that this is fundamentally wrong. That's not why he's calling you.
Oh,
Now,
that's
of
not
course,
where I go.
no. I mean, now of course sometimes you can get lucky and when you get one of these jokers that calls you, and they can help facilitate your efforts to, set up the underground network to get the women out of the situation. But I wouldn't be surprised if every last one of them was a case of not caring about the person, but it was, don't ding up my shiny toy. That's my that's my whore, you know?
Yeah, I'd say just about every call I've gotten, yeah, from a guy that said he wanted to get a girl out of a trafficking situation. That's been what he's wanted me to do, is to get her into his house. And I've had to
Yep,
explain that's not that's from the frying pan into the fire. So we've had some
that's
problems with that. But at least, I'm just saying that I can at least get tipped off to where the trafficking is, and then with their help I have been able to get girls out. So
it, right. I mean, if these see the thing is, if these Johns really wanted to stop it, they'd have a very simple thing to do, and that is not participate in this calculus of evil, this
that's it.
economy
That's
of
it. These guys,
destruction,
that's it.
this
Traffickers are there to make
economy of
money. That's it.
femicost.
These traffickers
And
are
I
there to
call
make
it that
money.
in
And
my
if they
book.
stop making money, that's it, though. If they stop making money, they'd stop it. Period. That's it. If there
That's
was no
right.
demand, they
And
would stop.
I mean, I got a phone call a few months back from a guy who contacted me on Facebook. He didn't know I was an exited woman. He didn't know I was a trafficking survivor. He knew me as I'm more commonly known, which is as a radical feminist and an author, and a bioethics writer. I mean, I'm a freelance writer. I have a bachelor's degree in math, but I somehow fell into writing. Don't ask how. Um,
That's just
but
interesting to
anyway, he
me. You got a
contacted
degree
me.
in math, and then you write. Okay. Okay.
Well, I couldn't get a job after I graduated from college as a non-traditional age student. I had these obstacles of extreme poverty
Mm,
because that 8 grand only got me so far.
right.
And the obstacles that I had to overcome was suspicion about my past being checkered, which
Mm,
that alone was enough to taint me and cause me to be denied any opportunities for jobs. This is why I was never really able to escape poverty and get a good job with health and dental benefits and pick up the pieces of my life, even after I went into debt for a college education.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I just got a call from a woman that I've known for like years and years and years. She used to be heavily involved with a group that we started up in Canada back in the 90s. She was like, "Help, you've got to get my name down off of Google." And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Every time I try to go get a job now, they say I was a prostitute and I'm not getting the job." I mean, yeah, it's really hard.
So, yeah, and here's the thing, too, and this is why I would also be very suspicious, because up until within the past decade, women women and girls like me, I mean, we were looked at as trash, as garbage. We were literally thrown away with the full blessing and support of this entire society. Bear that in mind.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, all these faith-based initiatives are popping up, and and they're getting the lion's share. They're grabbing all of this money that's federal money from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. In fact, I'm going to email you the latest report from the Department of Health and Human Services on the breakdown of which organizations got what money.
Uh-huh.
And it's pretty interesting. And these are all organizations, none of them help adult survivors that have been struggling and never got help to rebuild their lives.
Well, and
Most of
another
them are
thing,
in the business of, most of them are raking in donations for, quote, providing awareness. Now, everybody's been aware of trafficking, and they have accepted it as that this is okay to do to an entire class of women, that a certain that an entire class of women can be thrown away for men to, excuse my language, fuck to death.
yeah.
So don't nobody can tell me that we need awareness. Everybody was aware. What was that everybody didn't
Well,
care
I got a real
until it was
problem. I got a real
their
problem with
own
this
daughter.
because let me tell you something. I had a lot of PTSD, as you can imagine, with my own trafficking. So my sponsor, the man who was helping me go through this, who was a vet, he took me, believe it or not, to a Holocaust survivors group because he wanted to help teach me how to survive this. Now, so I became very interested in everything to do with the Jewish culture, World War II. Now, I remember watching this documentary about the concentration camps and everything, and there I'll never forget this. There was these like coffee clubs right next, like a few miles from Auschwitz, and they said that when they would burn the bodies, that the ashes would float down and like coat the tables and the cars, and they said that everybody would have to come sweep the ashes off everything in the morning to open up the coffee shops. Now they said, and the smell and everything. So they said that those people were very aware that people were being burned over at Oswich. Okay, now the thing is that they didn't know what to do about it. Now I see all this money going out for awareness. Okay, my phone is ringing off the hook from victims who need things done to get out of these situations. Okay, awareness, schmareness is the way I'm looking. We know what's going on. I've got victims over here who need help. Now, right here in Nevada, just as an example of one state, it's going on everywhere. I call them up and say, you guys have gotten federal money. I've got Vic over here that need help. I need help. They're ignoring me. Now, another problem is, this is my understanding, is that federal money means that it's supposed to go to anybody. Okay, but I have gotten a call from a Jewish trafficking survivor that got kicked out of the house over here, and a Buddhist, lesbian. As far as I know, federal money goes to all trafficking victims. But I wound up having to pick these women up and feed them and clothe them and help get care of dental work, get them jobs, to get their uniforms, to get to work, and pay for their work cards. And I've got back who had money, help. I'm going to die with these victims. And they just shut down. Now this is not right. You as a Jewish victim are an example of my point. And then I went to the Jewish Family Services over here and said, I need your help here. The Jewish trafficking victims are being completely ignored.
The same.
And they shut me out. You know that letter to the rabbi.
Let me tell you something. This happened. You know who Andrea Dworkin was?
Yeah.
She's not only known for being a radical feminist, but she was also a human trafficking survivor. And she, with the assistance of a law professor and lawyer named Catherine McKinnon, compiled testimony before the Meese Commission. And Andrea Dworkin testified to trafficking. She testified to the reality of snuff porn, where women are actually, murdered. And these snuff porn films, I've actually traced the money flow. There's a big market in the Pacific Rim for this, where the average going rate for a snuff film is $250,000.
Oh my God.
Yes, I talk about this in my book Without Apology, and I talk about the Picton case in there, because at my own expense, after asking for donations, because I don't have an income except for if people buy my books, which I've written and self-published 5 to date, the most recent one being Without Apology, in which I discuss and criticize the very social structures that create and maintain a trafficking problem and a prostitute class.
This is your book that's coming out. This is your book that's coming out June 1st, right?
Well, the book has already come out, but what the event is on June 1st is a book launch party to let people know that the book is out.
Oh,
because obviously when you're poor struggling.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Hello?
What's the link? Yeah, what's the link for that so people can find your book? What's the link?
It's on Amazon. I'll post it right here.
Okay. Send it to me and I'll attach it to the show. I'll attach it to the show in editing. But yeah, I'll attach the link so people can see your book. So you talk about this in your new book now.
I talk about this in my new book Without Apology. And, so I'm going to give you the link to the Barnes & Noble one, because that one has reviews on it. The Amazon one does not, although a customer who did review me at Barnes & Noble also tried to review me on Amazon, but Amazon has this nasty habit of not allowing somebody to post a review unless they've actually bought the book through Amazon, whether through the hard copy through Amazon, or whether the electronic copy through Amazon Kindle. So yeah, Amazon's they're kind of being schmucks right now. So I'm going to send you 2 links. There's the one for the Barnes & Noble that has there's 2 reviews already, both 5-star, I might add.
Got it.
And I'm going to also send you the one for Amazon, because that's the one that has the ability to find it in Kindle.
Yeah.
As well, because but this is, what my book sale royalties, and they're not that much. I mean, I get about $20 to $30 a month, because I can't afford, obviously, to market my books properly. I don't have the backing of a big trade name publishing company, and without really any much of any income, this is how I have to do it, is I have to self-publish and then post links all over cyberspace, and hope that somebody, finds out and that word of mouth catches on.
Right.
But Amazon really has put a hurt on struggling self-publishing authors this way by not posting reviews from people, because I had several people already call me when I said, hey, my book is out on March 13th. And they said, hey, we're going to PayPal you some money. These are people that follow me on Facebook, who follow my posts, who follow my blog on WordPress,
Right.
who know who I am. And they were the first customers, and they were, other women in feminist groups. They were men in progressive political groups, and at least 20 of them bought books by PayPaling me money or sending me a check to my land mail address, and I would ship them, a copy if they lived within the United States, because shipping international I wouldn't be able to afford to do.
Right.
And I would ship a copy to the medium mail autographed. And because they bought from me, they were not able to post the reviews for it on Amazon, because they bought directly from me as the publisher. They didn't buy it through Amazon. So
I didn't know Amazon was doing that. Wow. Okay.
yeah, I mean, and the reason I know this for a fact is because a woman who's a fellow survivor, she posted, because she was one of my first customers, and she posted a review at both Barnes and Noble and Amazon. And Amazon wouldn't keep her review up. It was up for only like a couple days before they figured out that she didn't buy the book through them.
Wow.
So that's why I posted the two, because I wanted people to see the reviews at Barnes and Noble, because that's where the two reviews did get posted so far.
Okay. I'll make sure both links are up for our listeners, so they can do that and order your book too.
Yeah, and they can order the book either hard copy or through Amazon Kindle. I will say this, that's one good thing about the Kindle, is that people that would normally, because a lot of people are hurting for money right now, and I can understand that, because I don't have any income at all right now, except for if people buy my books. And this is because I had to struggle after trying to exit. After exiting, I wanted to stay exited, and I did. But I paid one hell of a price, because just being suspected of having a checkered past, and being from poverty, and not having any ties into mainstream middle class society, the few good jobs that are available to women, that are available to non-prostituted women, I couldn't get hired for. My teeth started to rot out of my head due to years of lack of access to dental care, because of having no money and no insurance after the $8,000 ran out. And after I moved across state, after I graduated from college, I did get a job briefly at a brokerage firm, but that was commissions only, where I had to work 90 hours a week to get paid maybe a few $100s in commissions for getting a mutual fund account. And then after 9/11 happened, 5 months after that, well, there went my job. And because I was a commission-only paid sales employee as a broker, I wasn't eligible for unemployment. So I was back to square one, and I could no longer afford a place to live in Philadelphia, which is 3 times as expensive as to the part of Pennsylvania where I now live, which is in Erie County, which is one of the poorest areas of the state. And I moved there, and eventually, I found somebody who was 25 years older than me, who didn't care about my past. He just wanted a buddy, a friend, to go out and salvage scrap metal with and collect used Ford parts, because he was eccentric and he thought he was going to corner the market on used Ford parts and sell them on eBay. And he was a lot older than me, but I want to tell you, it wasn't. And he was struggling as a disabled worker. He had become disabled on a job when he worked in a foundry at making $9 an hour. So he was on disability and trying to salvage. I come across state with just what money I'd saved from my short-lived brokerage firm job after 9/11. So I had this huge gap in my life where all I had was 5 months work history experience. I was new in town. And my teeth started to go to hell because I couldn't afford dental care. Well, you try getting even a minimum wage job at McDonald's looking like that.
Oh, listen, I know. This is what I'm saying about the Jewish girl that got kicked out of the Salvation Army. I mean, where do you go when the Salvation Army kicks you out? This woman didn't have hardly a tooth in her head. Okay, she had, oh my God, her front tooth was like rotted. She told me that the pimp had actually like punched her, which is why most of her teeth were missing. I knew good and well I couldn't get her on a job interview like that. So this is Vegas. Most of the jobs you're dealing with customer service. I had to fix these women's teeth in order to get her a job. Yeah, and you know what? That's been my experience with most trafficking victims. I don't know why pimps like to break teeth, but they do, and we wind up having to get their teeth fixed. Yeah, a lot, you know? Yeah.
And if it's not pimps, it's Johns that do it.
Oh,
Because I've spoken with other survivors that have been beaten within an inch of their lives by Johns
worse than that.
because they had.
Let me tell you,
They were beaten.
We've got one victim that said that when she was a child, that they forced her to oh my God, they forced her to drink urine when she was a child. It rotted her teeth out. So I mean, yeah, we have a lot of dental problems, you know.
And the thing is that why these men do this? Why do they want to pay for the right to rape a woman? Why do they want to pay to degrade an entire class of women?
And
why would a man
have a child drink urine? I mean, yeah.
Why would these people want to have a status quo where poor women are not able to have any other opportunity? I have yet to talk to one survivor who said, yeah, I chose the sex trade over heavy equipment operator, union construction worker, plumber, electrician, lawyer, surgeon, college professor, CEO, bank president, human resources manager, or even shift supervisor at a plastics plant.
Yeah, they don't.
Not one of those women.
No.
None of the other women, and it was the same deal with me. If that employer would not have told me that I could have that $4 an hour job in the co-op program if I went to bed with him, knowing that that would either put me off or force me to get into bed with him, I would have never been pushed right into the arms of traffickers.
Absolutely.
This, and if the guidance counselor whom I went to for help, if he would have cared and said, I don't support women and girls being treated this way, and done something about this and helped me, I wouldn't have been pushed into the arms of traffickers.
Well, you hit on the head. Well, yeah, I mean, right there, though, you hit on the head how I wound up getting involved in this situation, because I was putting myself through school working as a waitress, and I had no idea why all of a sudden I kept being fired. Fired. All of a sudden, my rent's due. I don't know what to do. And these people said that they would initially put just answering the phone. That was the offer. Well, you can just answer the phone, and it went downhill from there. What happened was, years later, one of these pimps got into AA, and he had to make amends. So he calls me up, and he says, I want you to know that when you kept getting fired every 3 days from a job, he said, we were going to the owners of these clubs and telling them that we were going to burn it down if they didn't fire you. And I'm like, excuse me? He said, we knew if we got you cornered, economically, that you'd have no choice. So they deliberately, and I went to the club owners and verified it. They had gone and said that they'd burn these clubs down if they didn't fire me, until literally there was no place left for me to work. So you hit it on the head. They knew that if they got me cornered economically, they could get me into position. They know
right.
Get these women in that position,
Exactly. And the thing is that even normal, quote, normal, mainstream middle class people, they're not only aware of this, but they look down on prostituted victims like we're scum.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
oh, yeah.
I'm going to tell you
something. Not just currently. I need to add this. Every time I went on television to talk about helping women, and also to go up against Joe Conforti when he was trying to push for the brothels, and I was trying to block that down, every single time I could say, I've been out of the business 20 years. I could say that. I've been out 20 years. I would go home and I would find an eviction notice on my door, and the next day I'd go in and be fired. Every single time. I would be evicted and fired. And that's here's another thing. And that was for used to be in the business,
And here's another thing. When I did finally meet somebody that cared, he was poor himself, but we were struggling to make it together, and we were kind of an odd couple, We were kind of like Sanford and Son, except he was much older than me, and I was this younger wife. and we were white instead of a black father-son team.
You sound cute, though.
But I had to scavenge through other people's garbage for 8 years to get scrap metal, just to get enough money to finally afford my upper denture. And by that time, I was 40 years old. And then I had the age discrimination, in addition to the long-term unemployment stigma and the being poor stigma against me. And and that's all on top of the regular discrimination that normal women that are not prostituted face in this country.
Oh, well, you hit it on the head too. When you get to be old and a poor woman, old poor women and the women with dental problems, oh yeah, forget it. The way they treat women, yeah.
Yeah, and so the thing is that when I finally got my denture, I was then 40 years old. I was no longer young, thin, and svelte. I had gained a few pounds. Nobody would hire me. And even companies that were owned by women-owned businesses, it was like, well, you have poor credit. Well, yeah, duh, you're from poverty. You're going to have poor credit.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you don't have any references, or you have too much of a gap in your work history where you've been unemployed for 3-4 years. We can't, they won't hire you. And, the thing of it is that there is literally no support for the poorest and most marginalized women. And in my book, Without Apology, I talk about that, about the gun of economic terrorism, of poverty, and the feminization of poverty that drives a lot of this, because a lot of people don't connect the two. And I talked about this before, and that is that not only are women in the prostitute class thrown away, but those of us who escape, everybody in mainstream society wishes that we wouldn't have. They wished we were dead, including a lot of these so-called, nice Christian fundraising people, from these big churches and the faith-based initiatives.
They say they want to help us. They say they want to help us, but boy, do they want to keep us at arm's distance, boy,
Well, I have yet to meet a destitute adult survivor like myself who's gotten any real material help. And when I say real material help, I mean help to stay exited.
Yeah.
I mean the offer of a job.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about my prostituted sisters that came out of this a lot less fortunate than me. I came out without an arrest record because I was prostituted inside a strip joint that fronted as a brothel. And the cops were Johns.
Yeah.
And I escaped without any STDs, which meant that I escaped without any debilitating health problems. Except now I have glaucoma, which is an old age issue, and it's also a hereditary issue. And you think I can even get help with Medicaid for that? No, I'm having to beg for donations, and hardly, I'll tell you who mostly donated. Other women in poverty, especially other women who were also exited women.
Well, this is another thing that we've had to learn to do in the group. I mean, one of the things I've had to learn to do for us in Sex Workers Anonymous is exactly that, because trust me, I've learned that to get a job. Well, the thing is, I've learned that for us to get a job, you almost have to have references. So I fudge a little, but I find that I've had to give rental references and job references in order to get us into work. Because you hit it on the head, I'm finding that to help these women get work, I have to give some job references, or to get them rental history. I've got to fudge a little rent history. But that's what I'm saying is I'm having to do things to help us. These other groups that are out there doing their little awareness and their fundraisers, they're not doing anything.
Well, the thing is that's sad, is that there are individual people who are Christians, who are really good people, and who really do care. And I met a couple. One of them is, a couple of them are people that are affiliated with Truckers Against Trafficking.
Yeah.
And when I talked with them, and of course, I initially came off with a very prickly personality, because I'm thinking, yeah, nobody in this society cared 2 pins for the entire time that I'd been exited. Nobody cared when I was thrown away as a 13-year-old orphan child. Now all of a sudden, all these nonprofits are starting up. What's up with this? Yeah. So anyway, a couple of them got past my anger, which is justified because it's a righteous anger. Yeah. Because I wouldn't wish on another person's daughter for 4 seconds what I suffered for 4 years.
Well, and your anger is also your anger is also that no one was helping you. Of course, you're angry.
Well, the thing is, what has me the most angry is that so many people want to use women like me as their poster child, but yet they're not helping the women like me. And you know what? There's some that, and I understand not everybody can afford to give to my glaucoma fundraiser for my eyesight to get I mean, I've needed glaucoma treatment since 2010 when I got diagnosed. To date, I've gotten none.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out there. I have a medical fundraiser going on. I'm hoping that enough copies of my book sell that I can not only help myself and get on my feet, but have a significant amount left over to also help, organizations like TAPS, which, provides real help to women who not only want to exit, but stay exited. And organizations like, that are survivor run, and cash strapped, that are not getting a dime from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and they're not really getting much donations from the public either.
No, we're
because
not.
they're being muscled out.
Well, and I'll tell you
So
what,
I mean,
that's
these
just
people.
it. No, you hit it on the head. We are being totally having money siphoned away, and this is the problem. And I got to address this because it's not about needing money. Here's the thing: is like, for example, there was a woman who contacted me that her church has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to help trafficking victims, and they put her as the head of the local task force. And she said that she got this call saying, "Get in the car, we're going to go out and we're going to do an outreach." So she got all excited thinking, "Oh, we're going to go do an outreach in Las Vegas." I mean, of course, there's prostitutes and trafficking victims out here. So she said they go out, and all of a sudden, she said there's these women that they put together and they bound them up like they were bound and chained. And then they took photographs of women that looked like they were bound and chained on Las Vegas Boulevard. And they said, "Okay, you can go home." Okay, that's what I'm saying. They took photograph of these women that were bound and chained on Las Vegas Boulevard, and then they said, "Okay, you can go home." Now she says, "Wait a minute. I thought we were going to do an outreach," and the guy leading it said, "Yeah, that was it. We took photographs, and then we're going to use this to do a fundraiser." And she was like, "No, I thought we came out here to do an outreach." Now
Wait,
been talking to
wait.
the woman about going out there and talking to to the women and seeing if they needed help and getting them into help if they needed it. That doesn't cost anything. It's legwork. You go out and you talk to them. But this is what the guy did and called it outreach, and then he's putting it online and raising money. Now the same amount of legwork, the same amount of people that were
Can I
out there
throw up
taking
now?
photographs could have been out there talking to these women and saying, "Do you need any help? Are you okay? Do you need anything?" You know what I mean? But it was just all that
Well,
wasted time and energy. It just blew my mind. You know?
I'm going to tell you, this really sickens me because, as a feminist, the idea that anybody would think it was okay to promote BDSM porn, that's kind of like what it is. It's almost like porn,
I
where they're exploiting prostituted women
I agree.
in torture pictures. They're using imagery of torture,
Yep.
of sexual torture and sexual sadism,
Yep.
which, I mean, is
It's a
that
little sick to
really,
me.
what kind of message does that send?
Here's what
That is
bothers me. You know what? See, you and
disgusting.
I know this. You and I know this. Is I see these images, and they're saying that it's to help trafficking victims, and it somehow makes it okay to look at this image of a bound woman. Oh, well, it's an image of a trafficking victim, and we're trying to help trafficking victims, so it's okay to look like this. No, it's not okay. You still
No,
get
it's not.
a bound woman, and it's not okay. And to raise money, do you know how sick this is? He's taking an
Pictures of
image of a
that.
woman and using it to raise money. That's freaking sick. Oh God, I'm sorry. It just really sickened me when I found out they did this.